the new administration?
President Obama pledges himself to work for a world free of nuclear weapons. Then I read a speech given by the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov. And in that speech, there is a long statement that he quotes from President Medvedev, the president of Russia. And in that statement of President Medvedev is a statement that Russia intends to work for a world free of nuclear weapons. So both these leaders have said publicly that that's their objective. Now, I think, and I know because we've discussed this, President Gorbachev and I agree entirely, a vision of what you want to get is terrifically important in getting somewhere with this. But what you have to do is a lot of hard work on different things that have to get accomplished if you're going to achieve the goal. But if you have the goal, it causes you to think about the steps you need to take. And when you identify the steps, it gives the goal more of a sense of reality. So it's that interactive process that's now starting to go on that I think is potentially very constructive.
The key word is a lot of work. And I would like to recall, and this is something that will be of interest to these people, George Shultz, Secretary of State Shultz, years ago was working on the Middle East problem, the problem that was of great concern to him and to all of us. And he did shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East. He visited various capitals in the Middle East. We were watching him shuttling, and then a little later, George Shultz came to certain conclusions that he shared with us in Moscow, and he said, I think that we no longer have the goal of pushing the Soviet Union out of the Middle East. We understand that we must work together. There are some people there who support the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union supports some countries. There are others who support the United States, but we must work together. And so we started discussing the Middle East. We started working, and eventually that brought the Madrid Peace Conference on the Middle East. And now something else needs to be done. More needs to be done.
Let me just understand this. Both of you believe that it is possible to start a process now that will eliminate all nuclear weapons from the face of the earth.
Eventually.
What does eventually mean?
Don't know, but I think it needs to be worked on with a sense of urgency. But there are all kinds of things that you have to address in order to have it come about.
Well, tell me what the first three steps are.
Well, the first step is for the United States and Russia to extend or develop further the Strategic Arms Treaty that expires in December of this year. And that's a critical treaty because it has in it the most extensive verification provisions that exist. There's also been a decade or so of experience in administering them. And you know that if you're really going to get to a world free of nuclear weapons, everybody will want to be sure that you can verify.
Trust and verify.
That is so. And so that's you asked what to do first, that's got to be number one on the hit parade, right there.
If Russia and the United States of America show the example of their commitment to Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, calling for eventual nuclear disarmament, and this concerns them and other members of the nuclear club, if they continue the process of reducing and moving toward the elimination of nuclear weapons, then others will understand that they too need to join in that movement. Now the process of nuclear reductions has stopped, and so other countries are saying that these two nations want to have absolute weapons and to keep them hostage. There are 40 countries now who are on the threshold, technically capable of creating nuclear weapons, and they are thinking. So the first step is very important. It's the most important step.
President Medvedev and Prime Minister Putin, are they two people that President Obama can do business with?
Да.
Yes.
Да.
Yes.
I've met with both of them in various occasions, and I agree. Da.
And the possibilities are what, as they reset the relationship?
The possibilities are for a constructive dialogue that addresses problems. There are plenty of tensions. Let's not hide that fact, but they can be addressed. And there are many things that are in the joint interests of Russia and the United States that you can build on and work on together. After all, when we started, nothing could have been more tense than the Cold War days. But when we got through, it was altogether different. So constructive dialogue is very helpful.
You called his country an evil empire.
I didn't, but anyway. But I remember when Paul Nitze, who I had the privilege of working with, was testifying before a Senate committee, and one of the senators said to him, "Paul, how can you serve in an administration where the president would call the Soviet Union an evil empire?" And Paul said to him, "Senator, have you considered the possibility that the statement might be accurate?" So there was a difference, but we worked at it. And by the time we got through, I think there was a lot of change, genuine change.
Но когда приехал он с визитом,
But when Reagan came on a state visit
кстати,
to Moscow, and by the way, George knows that very well,
у нас был подход такой:
we
идти навстречу во всем, что запросит
decided
президент
that
и
we
его окружение.
will agree with whatever request the president and his people would make. They had meetings with refuseniks, they had meetings with other people who wanted to talk to the president, they walked the streets. Nancy went to Yasnaya Polyana and to Leningrad, St. Petersburg. We never said no.
И вот здесь
And
интересно, когда мы с ним
there was an
прогуливались
interesting
по Кремлю,
instance, situation when we took a walk in the Kremlin. President Reagan was shown the Tsar cannon, and there was a group of journalists there. We approached them, and one of the Russian reporters,
кстати, я ему не давал поручения.
by the way, he had not been instructed by me. I can tell you that.
Президент,
He asked, Mr.
вы
President,
сейчас считаете,
do you
что
still believe that
Советский
the
Союз
Soviet
это
Union
империя?
is an evil empire?
Он сказал: нет,
She
я
said,
сейчас
no.
не считаю.
I no longer think so.
Ну а как же тогда? А тогда,
Why?
когда я
She
говорил,
said,
я считал, что я правильно.
I believed that when I said that.
Все был снят этот вопрос.
So that question was off the table. So the time came when we were able to discuss things very directly.
Did he ever ask you if you believed in God?
Нет, вы знаете, об этом у нас о религии заходило.
Not to my recollection, but we did talk about religion.
You did.
Он, наверное,
He
чувствовал, что у
felt
нас у русских
that
есть
in
такое
our country,
в обиходе
we
потребление. Ну,
Russians
слава Богу. Всё обошлось.
often mention God. We say, thank God it didn't happen, for example, if something bad hadn't happened, or we say, God help when we want something to happen. This is part of our everyday language. I'm a baptized person. I was christened in our family. There were many Christian believers, and I am not among them. I'm not a believer myself, but I'm the person who brought together the leaders of all religions, and in the Soviet Union, all world religions were represented, and I proposed to them that we work together on a law on freedom of conscience. And that law was so strong that the Democrats who followed us decided to restrict it in certain ways, to make it less democratic. So it was in my time that we began to give the believers back their churches. Many people started to go to church. Some of them are believers, some of them are just interested. That's the free choice of every individual. So from that standpoint, I believe that my position was important.
There is the question of some grand bargain between the United States and Russia, in which the United States would do something about the anti-defense missiles, the anti-missile defense system in Poland, and Russia would help in Iran and getting Iran not to build nuclear weapons. Does that idea have merit with you?
No. I think they're subjects that are important, each in their own right. It goes back to the Reagan-Gorbachev days. We talked, but we never could really get very far, about the importance of having an ability to defend yourself against ballistic missiles. And at least as I look at it, Russians have made some interesting proposals. So if I were doing it, I would be working to see if there isn't some way that we and Russia can develop an ability to intercept ballistic missiles in our interests and in their interests.
But
and the same thing with Iran. I don't think it's in the interest of Russia to have Iran become a country with a nuclear weapon. I'm sure you'd agree with that. So we should be able to work out how to work better together on that.
I'm sorry?
I said almost the same thing in the same words about Iran. I think there is something in the air. I think that ultimately we must go back to Earth and develop specific proposals to be discussed. We have a common position, a common understanding that it is unacceptable for Iran to have nuclear weapons. And that's not disrespectful of Iran. I believe that even for Iran itself, it's better not to have nuclear weapons. And I would like to add that the United States should have started working on the relationship with Iran a long time ago. With Syria, the same. You cannot hope that you can achieve your goals by using force, by using the Sixth Fleet or the Fifth Fleet or whatever. Diplomacy is above all dialogue. It is above all meeting and talking, and I believe that right now there is hope that this could begin to happen, that contacts will start. I think this is very important.
Put in context, Soviet Jewry, going to Israel, the United States, and other places, the relationship between Reagan and President Gorbachev, and what you think the legacy of the relationship was.
Well, I think, first of all, as I said earlier, it reinforces the importance of freedom. And then second, it tells you that if you think something is really important, then you better work on it. Even if it seems for a long while like it's fruitless, you're not getting anywhere. I remember at one time I received an award for work on the Soviet Jewry issue. And I went, but I said, I don't feel very good about this because we've all worked on it, but nothing's happened. So, but still, you work on it anyway, if you think it's right. And maybe sooner or later, you'll get somewhere. It comes back to something that I said in connection with the nuclear issue. There's a huge interaction between a vision and what you do to try to get to accomplish that vision. And if you don't have the vision, your steps are hit or miss. At the same time, if you can't think of concrete things, then your vision doesn't measure up. So I think the persistence and clarity with which President Reagan worked on this issue was very important. But it was also important that in the end he had a negotiating partner with whom you could have a real conversation, and who also had an instinct for freedom, and an instinct that, as I said earlier, maybe comes out of family life. He has a close, warm family life, and that tells you something about a human being.
Perestroika, glasnost are important parts of the 20th century. Tell me what you regret most.
Don't answer.
Я о многом сожалею.
Well, I regret quite a few things.
Прежде всего, я очень
First of all, I
сожалею, что
very much regret
рано ушла Раиса
that
из жизни.
Raisa
Это самое
passed away so early.
это самое.
That
It's
is
very
very
significant
painful.
that that's the first thing that
Вот
he
видите,
said.
он первое сказал об этом, это очень важно.
А что касается
And
перестройки,
as regards perestroika,
мне часто задают вопрос,
I'm
что
often
перестройка
asked-
потерпела поражение?
was perestroika defeated?
Мой ответ такой.
My reply is,
Я персонально, как политик,
personally, I, as a
проиграл на
politician,
заключительном этапе.
lost in the final stage.
Но перестройка,
But perestroika
она уже такой путь прошла,
had gone a long way,
были такие законы,
and it had created the kind of laws and the kind of conditions that brought us to the point of no return, to the point where going back to the past is impossible. It will not happen, and it is important. I'm also saying that we are in the process of democratic transition. 35 countries are making that transition today, and I believe that we're just at the most halfway down the road to our goal. And I would like to emphasize this to the television viewers, to the American people. You should understand that we are finding it difficult in the kind of country that we are to do everything successfully. We cannot do it quickly, but we will continue to go down the road of democracy. There will be some rollbacks. There have been some rollbacks and some things that are not quite democratic. Well, I remember I was speaking years ago on the West Coast, and I said,
вы, американцы, свою
what
демократию
you Americans
строили 100 лет,
were building your democracy for 200 years,
а от нас хотите, чтобы мы за
and you
200
want
дней это
us
все сделали?
to do the same thing in 200 days.
Конечно, мы талантливее вас.
Of course, I said we are more talented than you are, but not that much more talented.
Между прочим, и там
And
тему закончили.
by the way, in that audience too, there was applause when I said that.
Yes, and I would add to this, because of this audience, in our discussion, the immigration of so many Jews who back to Israel and the impact they have, and also to this country and other places. It is a remarkable thing that the two of you did in terms of creating history. You, alongside President Reagan, there were other world figures, the Pope being one of them who played a role. But it is a remarkable achievement to shape history and to know that what took place has profound consequences that are still even more so relevant today. Thank you for sharing this time.